Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us live. I am Sean Phillips, as always, joined alongside my two co-hosts, Mr. Andy Van Beber and Travis Kirkendall, and the three of us make up the Voice of Reason podcast right here on this lovely Monday evening. Gentlemen, how are you two doing today?
Great. I am tired as a dog, but 2 more days of being in Illinois and then I'm out.
Then you are Gonzy Matones, as the
Yeah.
young kids would say. How excited are you?
I'm really, it hasn't hit me yet, but I mean, all we've got left is just our sectional, our bed. The kids are at church camp this week, so it's our bed, our dressers, and our TV, and then what I've got right here, just what I've got set up on the table right here. Our bed. The kids are at church camp.
Ah, yeah.
I'm getting
Man, that's
who's-
that was me. I fixed it. That
Okay.
was me.
Okay.
No, yeah. Well, that it sounds like as far as your week ahead of you, you've got a whole bunch of busy stuff. How about this past weekend? Did you do anything fun?
I DJ'd a wedding.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. Travis, how about yourself? Do anything good this weekend?
Well, first I want to ask B, how long did you live in Illinois? How long have you been here?
Well, this current stint that I'm on is 16 and a half years. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, this is the longest place I've ever lived at. So, it's going to be kind of it's. I try to keep my son
Bittersweet.
Yeah, my son this morning when we were leaving for church camp, he was just like, I can't believe this is. I said, "Oh, let's time to go. It's time to go. It's time to go." Because he gets really sentimental about stuff and everything, and so it was. And so when they come, I mean, last night was the last night they spent at the house, and my daughter she was just happy to go to camp to be with her friends, and my son was just like, "Oh, this is the last time," so it'll be, it's bittersweet, yeah.
That's a hard thing. I mean, growing up in a house like that, I mean, and then you move. Moving's hard. I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah. But
And
anybody want to come and help me unload a trailer on Thursday about 9 o'clock, 9:30 there in Louisiana?
So
Well,
I
best I can
can't
do is
make any
Friday.
promises. I may or may not be in that area, but a lot of it just kind of rides on MEPS. So there is a chance, but I won't make a promise. If I arrive, I arrive. But I am literally at the mercy of MEPS right now. So
oh yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah,
What'd you do this weekend, Sean? Tell us about your interesting weekend.
I well, so my weekend started a little bit early. Thursday, I left Jeff City, went back towards home, and completely was out of the woods. It literally felt like being on a deserted island. That is the one thing about being back home that is more annoying than anything is technology shuts down. It is literally like in the midst of like an atom bomb has dropped in the village of Whiteside because to put it into perspective, we recently switched to AT&T because AT&T was the only thing that worked out that way.
Mm.
Like that was the only phone service that would pick up anything. And all weekend while I was visiting my parents back home, no internet connection, no service, no nothing with
Oh,
AT&T. And T. And even in the last couple of weeks, like they switched because their service was so bad. AT&T worked for about 3 weeks and it has just ceased to stop working. Like it's ridiculous out there. And they also have Windstream, which for
that's a
those that don't know
that's a
what Windstream
that's a
is,
joke.
it's an internet company that went bankrupt. Like Windstream is a bankrupt company who, if you call, like, because years ago we had called them, and this was years ago, had called them, and they had told us just straight up, they're like, we are not putting new technology into the infrastructure out there. There will be no upgrades, and that is like there needs to be something done. Like there needs to be some kind of renovation to the rural towns because that's the biggest killer of the
Well,
community. I
I
mean, there
will.
are people just now finding out that Joe Biden is president in that area because it took that long for their internet to load.
Well, I tell you
yeah,
what,
they still got their Trump flags out and on,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
they I see. I don't know if Lauren Loggeman still watches. I saw she joined us, but I know that she comes to she works from home and she's been working out there at school because out there at her dad's house they have Windstream out there, And Larry says that he gets faster internet just on his phone than he does with. I guess they're out there at the end of the line out there in the country, and so they said Windstream just is a literal joke out there. So, but
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
I am going to be hooked up. I've already got my. So this is what I really loved. So the thing, and this is, I guess, this is how much of a dork I am. How excited I am about in Louisiana. So they have Spectrum, and so I called to set up my account, and I thought, well, I better schedule ahead so I can schedule for the the guy to be there and whatever. And they said, I said, so how do I do this? Do I need to schedule for a setup? And they say, no. How far are you from Hannibal? And I said, well, I'm actually going through Hannibal on Monday. And he said, yeah, just stop by our store, pick up a modem, and then all you do is you go to the house, screw it into the cable outlet into the wall, follow the setup instructions, and you're good to go. And I was like, seriously, I don't have to sit from 8 to 12 and, but she said, yeah. She said, and I said, so I'm going to be running 200 megs there, and I'm only going to pay $50 for it, and I'm paying $79 for 110 megs here, 120 megs here. So I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, it's actually like moving to a city was one of like the best things that could have happened, because when I had originally lived back home after I had moved there from St. Louis, we were looking at a house, and it was actually a nice house, would have been half the cost of the apartment that we ended up getting for a while. But the issue was you literally could not get internet in that location. Your only option was something like HughesNet, and that's just
HughesNet,
a joke.
Well, for how they advertise, I think that's how they advertise that on TV about HughesNet is like, live in the country and have the conveniences of living in the city.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's a bunch of crap, because I have my friends who live out in the country and they can't get even REA internet, and so they pay like $125 a month, and they only get so many gigs, and then once they hit their data limit, then they throttle them down to next to
Nothing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There is a new thing that's happening, and I don't know the names of any companies, but I do know that this is like something that is starting to be a new thing that's actually pretty ingenious. But essentially, there are companies now where they almost look like these black spheres on these poles, either on top of or next to people's houses. Essentially, what these balls do is they're an internet service. They provide internet into your home, but they ping off of cell phone towers.
Mm-hmm.
So any kind of, like, a lot of them are like, some of them are AT&T, which wouldn't have helped out where, my family was, but essentially it's like using a hotspot on your phone, except it's unlimited. I mean, it's truly unlimited. Now I'm sure there might be the throttle speeds as well with some of them, but I have talked to people that have used them. And I mean, if you're just looking for like Netflix and basic, internet streaming and doing your homework, like, it's perfect.
There's a guy
you got to find the person.
There's a guy I follow on TikTok, and he lives off the grid. He lives in West Virginia, and this dude, I mean, he's totally self-sufficient. He has solar panels, and he's set up watering filtration systems and all this stuff. I mean, he is totally 100% off the grid, and he has one of those things that you talked about, and he has it. He cut down some. He lives out in the middle of the pretty much wilderness country there in West Virginia, and he has one of those, and he had to cut down some trees to get a clear shot of his cell tower. But I mean, he streams like every Tuesday night, and it's just, I mean, and people ask him, it's like, well, what kind of speeds do you say? He said, well, I'm not getting anything fantastic, he said, but I usually average around 25 megs. I'm like, well, heck, that's enough to stream, live television and everything. So I mean, you can't beat that. So.
Yeah. No.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know they were doing that.
Yeah.
I think what's cool is the whole the Starlink thing that they're doing. I think that's pretty neat.
Is that with
that's just SpaceX, but Elon Musk?
Yeah. They said the setup for that though was like $500 for the equipment, but after that it's only going to be like $75-$80 a month.
I thought
it was supposed to be. I could have sworn like it was supposed to be free. Like
Really?
that is that the or is that like the end goal? The end goal is
I think the
for
end
it to be
goal is
free
for,
internet for the world, essentially.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and it,
literally what he's trying to do, which
yeah.
is
Well,
cool, but
it's gonna.
it's amazing actually. But
Oh
it's,
yeah.
Well, do you remember?
I don't know.
Did you guys see the movie Kingsman?
Mm-hmm.
No.
That you talking
So
about
the
the British Secret Service thing or whatever?
yes,
Yeah,
it's actually one of like the greatest underrated movies of
yeah.
all
I
time.
love
But
that
what's
show.
so funny about it is essentially it's the same thing like Elon Musk
Samuel L. Jackson
was
does. Yeah,
setting up because Samuel L. Jackson plays billionaire mogul who gives out these SIM cards and these phones that connect for free. So it's free internet, free cell phone for anyone that gets a SIM card, and then like
he
they
he tra-
basically install one anyway, like anywhere you go, you get a service, and you blow your head up.
Yeah, and he causes everybody to be their slaves and
I
everything.
love it.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Great movie.
And they'll go. No, so I know earlier we had spoken. Andy, you've got a video that you're wanting to show us
Yes,
about our
yes.
current president's potentially falling asleep at the podium, or what?
No,
What's going on?
it's actually a little bit better. I'll just play this video. This happened. Travis and I have seen this. This happened Friday. This was at a news conference. I'm just going to preface this by saying that Joe was whispering, and it frightened me a little bit. And well, you know, we'll just we'll play it here. Hold on a second. Let me get my mic set up.
Yeah, I'm excited.
This is great.
People are waiting for relief. I got them $1.9 trillion relief so far. They're going to be getting checks in the mail that are consequential this week for childcare. A lot has been happened already, number one. Number two, I'm going to fight like heck to get them the rest of what I think has to be done. I'm going to be going around the country, spending time making the case to the American people that this just isn't about showing an identification that this is who I am when I vote. This isn't just about whether or not, you can provide water for someone standing in line while they're waiting to vote. This is about who gets to judge whether your vote counted after it's been cast. Think about it. Don't dismiss it at all. Just remind them, I wrote the bill on the environment. Why would I not be for it? Employers can't find workers. I said, yeah, pay them more. This is an employees bargaining chip now.
Oh.
And there you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to
Yeah, so that is the leader of the free world, ladies and gentlemen. And, you know, and what something else that they didn't show in that clip, but later on, he was getting ready to leave the podium, and Kamala had to whisper something in his ear, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that." I was like, you know, I've you know I've lived through 7 presidents, and I have never seen a vice president lean over to a president and say, uh, "Sir, you forgot something. You might want to." And by far, that had to have been the strangest press conference that I had ever seen. And
Did you watch the whole thing?
I watched probably about 10 minutes of it, and it was just
It was hard to watch the
it
whole.
was it was just it was just like he was, because you know a lot of his stuff is usually prepared. He'll have his prepared script, you know, and I mean they always said Obama always read off a prompter, and you know, and I mean heck, we seen what Trump did when
Well, at least he was good at it.
well, yeah, and when Trump goes off, you know, when Trump went off the rails, whenever he would go off the rails and do, oh my, that was a train wreck. But this, I mean,
Yeah.
and this is what bothers me. With the last 2 presidents we have had, this is the best that we could dig up. Literally, 2 70-plus-year-old men who we propped up in the corner. We have some of the brightest young political minds on both sides. On both sides of the
Yeah.
aisle. And all we can get are these two crusty old farts who are so. I mean, Joe just reminds me that, man, I need to be taking my fish oil so I don't go off the, help brain growth and everything else so I don't go off the deep end later on.
No kidding. No freaking kidding.
I mean,
Yeah, I that was one of the killer. I mean, I think just goes to show with how tied up we are in Democratic and Republican politics and two-party politics, because there's other options. People seem to forget that there are just other options, and it's unfortunate. Now, as at least what I've seen, and it's not in all cases, but the unfortunate truth is the thing that makes the mainstream, because that's what sells the tickets, that's what gets the viewers, that's what sells the ads, are the people that we see thrust into the spotlight, therefore making one side think like this is what they're all like on the other side, or vice versa. Is literally like you see Matt Gaetz of like the Republicans,
oh my god!
and then
that
you
guy.
have the AOCs of the Democrats. You have these extremists on both sides that like that's who, whenever like Democrats think Republican, they're like, oh my god, they're all like, Tommy Lauren, or what's that one white chick's name?
Oh, that was on. Used to that. Yeah, that was on.
She's
Blaze
very.
TV. Oh yeah, she was really.
Yeah. Or like everyone, it's like, oh my gosh, he's a conservative. He must listen to Ben Shapiro nonstop, and like all he does, So like they have their minds up about these things, and it's the same with the other side. Like, this person's a Democrat. They're talking about this. They probably worship AOC just like every other, liberal arts college student that you've ever seen, just acting like she's the greatest thing that's ever existed. Like, it's just annoying.
You mentioned AOC,
but there are very good leaders on both sides.
You mentioned AOC. Did you see how she was stirring the pot this weekend on all the Sunday press shows about how that she was going against that Senator Sinema from Arizona about not pulling back on the filibuster and everything, and well, we just need to get they're stifling the minority is stifling us from getting anything done, and I just wanted to reach out. I really don't know how AOC became elected, how people. I'm just like. That, and we had this discussion. I don't want to have this same discussion again, but it goes back to what you were saying last week, Travis, about uneducated people, and how somebody like AOC, who doesn't know the basics of how government is supposed to work, and I'm just like, you would be if you were on the flip side of this coin and you were in the minority, you would be begging for this filibuster.
The thing is, what's AOC. The one thing I do, and I wouldn't even say like I like about her, is I like about her story is, she was like a server / bartender in New York, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And the fact that like she became a political, like superhero to some, that is a awesome story. I like that.
Well, yeah.
Because it was one of those examples of like a true like American citizen getting a position. Here's where the issue lies, though. Now you see what can happen. We saw it with Trump, of what the inexperience of someone that hasn't spent real time in politics, what ends up happening. And now you have this. It's one of those things where like if anything, like she is this like battle cry, or that the Democratic Party seems to have, or like certain people that lean real far right, of those Bernie or bust kind of bros and guys and gals, like they are so far right, so far on the socialist spectrum, that it's just like I don't think they understand how dangerous those people are, those beliefs and ideas can be. Yes, there are very good ideas and practices that could potentially, over time, with proper care and done properly, can actually benefit the American society. The issue is with individuals like AOC and then like her mentor and God figure of Bernie, was it has to happen right now, this way, no ifs, ands, or buts. And if you don't like it, you're either this, and that's end of story. We're not going to have the conversation. Oh, you want to have the conversation? Don't want to have it. Don't want to debate you. I'm just going to say you're wrong. And I'm going to prove my point. And if I don't get what I want, I'm going to stomp my feet and blame XYZ. And that's just, and then people are like, yep, good enough for us. Vote her in.
When you look at the political spectrum, so what you've just described, I mean, you've went from one side of the political, and I think some people don't even know what that term means, but when you talk political spectrum, if I can just go basic for a second, when you talk political spectrum, you go from the far right, which is your ultra conservatives. These are your people who want to, send things back to the 1980s. Okay, then you have your
Let's not get it twisted. They want it back to the 90s when you had
yeah, exactly.
people. Yeah.
And then you have your conservatives. Okay, they want things to go back the way they want it. Make America great again is the most conservative statement that you can. I mean, that's a true statement of conservatism. Make America great again. Okay, I had so many. I'm not even going to chase that rabbit, but there are so many rabbits there that I could chase with that. But anyway, then you have your moderates. It's kind of where we three are. Then you have liberals who want to see change, but they'll go with gradual change. And then what you just described, Sean, radicals. Historians are now considering Barack Obama to be the first radical president that we've had because of the amount of things that he was able to do in 8 years. And that's what ruffled everybody's feathers. So now, and that's what I want to get back to saying, though, our original point, how is it then that we cannot get anybody? I mean, if you, okay, so you mentioned, who was that Republican you mentioned a while ago?
I can't pronounce his name, but it's Matt Gaetz, and I believe it's spelled like Gaetz or something like that.
And this guy is nothing short of a sexual predator himself. So you guys need to look him up. He's a piece of work. And then you've got
I've never even heard of this guy before.
You need to do the only thing I watch on Saturday Night Live anymore is Weekend Update, and they did a Weekend Update on Matt Gaetz a couple weeks ago, and I did a spit take just from watching it because they did some hilarious stuff about him. But anyway, I mean,
he's your like stereotypical like,
he's
election was rigged, all this stuff, but he's a total like frat douche. Election
was rigged. What I was
going
to say.
When he got busted for like chatting with some underage teenager, he's the kind of guy that like you'd expect the reaction of like, well, she was hot though, so I don't see what the problem is. Like, she was hot. Yeah, he's that kind of.
She looked 18.
Exactly.
Yeah,
literally, that's exactly how he seems.
Who would you guys consider? From your observations, and if anybody online wants to chime in too, who would you say would be somebody who you've watched or you've seen who's kind of flown under the radar, who should be somebody who should be considered, who should be looked at more, who's somebody who's caught your attention before?
Sean, you want to go first, or?
Yeah, because there's a couple that I really like. Man, one of the main guys that I really do think could actually make a big difference, but again, you have to tread water carefully because there are certain times where he pulls it a little bit too far right, but if he could kind of reel it in a little bit, could potentially be something, and that's Dan Crenshaw. Yes. I really like Dan Crenshaw.
Yes.
And I hate to say it like this too, but like, how badass would it be if just the leader of the free world going toe to toe with Putin with the eye patch on and just saying like, you're, legitimately. And I really, It's almost one of those things where because of like the eye patch, I don't know if people don't really necessarily take him seriously or if it's just kind of I don't know. But Dan Crenshaw could be one with a little bit more time experience. But again, the issue that I have with a lot of Republican politicians is now is the time, these next 3.5 years, now is the time where they need to. There is not a question anymore. Real Republican politicians need to distance themselves from like Trumpism.
Yes.
They
Yes.
need
They
to
do.
distance themselves.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see Dan roped up in that as much as I see others roped up in that, but a lot of them just have to be careful. That, like, unless that is broken, then the Republican Party, it's going to be. I mean, I don't know if you ever have a rebound from what they've seen, which is a shame because we've spoken about it before. I think all of us are very socially liberal and economically conservative, and if
Yeah, I would agree with
because,
that.
because of how politicians can be and how politicians are, it's you either have to be all in on one or all in on the other, and that is what's going to be kind of a big thing for
Oh yeah, like
a lot
I
of
would
Republican.
vote Democrat if there was a Democrat candidate that, if I agreed with the things that some of these Democratic candidates are proposing, but I just don't agree with the policies, therefore I didn't vote Democrat. It's not that I hate the Democrat Party and I never voted for them, and vice versa. If Republicans had policies in place or things I didn't like, I wouldn't vote for them. But I think people get too caught up in, well, I got to vote because I got to do what's best for the Republican Party, or I got to do what's best for the Democrat Party, or we're talking about the issues we had now. People voted for Biden because they hated Trump.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they believed in Biden. Most Democrats, I don't think, truly believed in Biden. I think it was the fact that they despised Trump so much that they ended up voting for the way they did. And they go back to the candidate. I would agree with Sean because that is someone I've actually been following quite a bit lately is Dan Crenshaw. And the reason I like the idea of him as being a potential president, you're talking about a man who has real world experience. Not a lot. He's not a career politician. This man was a Navy SEAL. He served his country, was blown up, lost an eye. And I think with that, and it's not just the fact that he was a Navy SEAL, it's the fact that this is a man who has real life experience and knows the consequences of foreign policy, like truly knows the consequences and how heavy these decisions can be. And I would rather have somebody making foreign policy decisions who actually knows and understands what it's like for the boots on the ground that are actually carrying out foreign policy. And also too, I listened to him almost, it was over a year ago. This is how I first found out about Dan Crenshaw. He was on Jordan Belfort's podcast, of all people.
Really?
And Jordan Belfort asked him a bunch of questions. It was a really good interview. And he has explanations like as to how he would fix things. Most of them, it seemed well thought out. Like it wasn't just he was BSing questions. Like he has solutions to problems. Maybe they're not the best solution, but he'll sit there and explain like this is how I think this could work. And he was on Joe Rogan recently too, and he made this is something he said that I actually really liked. He's like, look, I want to work with Democrats. He's like, look, we need both sides. We absolutely need both sides. He's like, they propose things that are good ideas, and he's like, but I'm not willing to just not compromise. He's like, I want to compromise, but the problem is, in his view, that the Democrats aren't willing to compromise. But he made the comment though. He's like, look, we need both sides of the spectrum. We have to have a balance. It wasn't just, screw the Democrats. He's like, we needed them. And he had really good solutions to some of the problems him and Rogan talked about. And I don't know, he really impresses me. Yeah, sometimes he can be a little far right on some issues maybe. But he's one of the few politicians I think that are in it for the right reasons and truly want to, better our country.
Well,
That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a veteran. I don't know. But
let me throw a couple things at you guys first before I introduce this next proposal. my candidate who I and people don't like. Some people just don't like this guy. Maybe you guys never heard him. The governor of Louisiana right now is a guy who's about my age. His name is Bobby Jindal, and he comes from I believe his grandparents were Indian immigrants. He's natural born citizen, and he has, in the 8 years that he's been the Republican governor of Louisiana, he's balanced their budget. He's gotten them back on track. He's gotten, cut back on their deficit spending. And I first learned about this guy and during it was back when Barack was president, and they used him as the Republican response to the Democratic State of the Union. And a lot of your up and coming stars in the party, if you will, the party will feature the opposition party will feature in the response to the State of the Union. And that's why I remember when Trump gave his first State of the Union address, they let John F. Kennedy's nephew give the response, and I thought, okay, here we go. This is going to be great. And you guys need to Google this. But so this guy gets up there, and it looks like he just put on lip balm, and his lips were just like glistening, and he had like he had slobber corn. I was like going, oh my, this is But anyway, so the thing that I want to propose to you is this, and I want to get your response to this. So as I was going through the checkout line today, I tend to look at the magazines and stuff that are there as I check out. And People Magazine, you guys know who's on the cover of People Magazine this week?
No,
I don't know off the top of my head.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Okay,
I love it. Yeah.
Okay.
So Dwayne's on there, and I didn't pick up the article and read it, but it said, how he's, the father of, how it's like been life as dad of girls, and life after loss of his father, and why he's thinking about becoming a candidate for president. Now, what do you think about that? If we see maybe not 2024, 2028, Dwayne Johnson for president and he's one that when he started out on the Republican side way back when, because he came out on the stage, I think it was either for George W. or it was for Mitt Romney, but now he has crossed the aisle over to the Democratic side. Would this be a Trump 2.0, or what do you guys think about something like that?
I just want to say, before I would even consider voting for him, for me, he would have to drop all of his sponsorships. Because for me, I would not be comfortable with a president who's getting paid by other companies, because I don't know, we've seen, these social media, we talked about it with like influencers, like we kind of question their narrative based off who really pays them. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I would be a little uncomfortable with somebody who is getting paid by these large corporations for Under Armour, whatever, the millions of sponsors that he has. If he was willing to do that, and he had good policies, and yeah, sure.
And
that'd be my stipulation.
What about you, Sean?
Yeah, I think the best thing to having him run for president would maybe be our American, youth fitness programs in schools would actually be worth a damn. And, maybe something like that could be done. But I'm in the similar boat with Travis. The problem that I see is we talk about, again, I believe that political experience is important. However, career politicians are also a very dangerous thing too. So it's one of those kind of double-edged swords where you would want him to have experience before taking the role as president of the United States. Look at Arnold. Arnold was the governor of California. Obviously he couldn't run for president, But if that would have been an option, like I could have seen him winning because he would have
Easily.
had the
Easily.
experience,
Easily.
right? The same thing goes for Dwayne. Dwayne is single-handedly has the largest Instagram account in the world. He is the most followed social. He is the most followed influencer in the world. Okay, people know who he is. People around the world know exactly who Dwayne the Rock Johnson is. You walk into the most out of the way, hole in the wall pub in any country on any continent in this planet, and I guarantee you someone in that building knows who Dwayne the Rock Johnson is. Okay. That kind of star power puts a lot of light on him, right? Already day one when he takes the job, look at guys like Reagan, who was a movie star before he
That's what I
became a
was gonna.
politician.
Yes, I was gonna
So
refer to that too, because people did
he,
not take Reagan seriously because Reagan ran for president in 70. He tried to get the Republican nomination and he lost to Richard Nixon in 72. Yeah, 72, and he didn't get the nomination in 72, and that's when Nixon, before the whole Watergate shambles. But yeah, people didn't take Reagan seriously because they said, here's this guy who's an actor, I mean, and knows nothing about politics.
yeah, and that's where the issue with like what I can say about The Rock, and this is just part of the reason why I think Trump won the first time, even though I think there's levels to it. As a business mogul, extremely successful, knows how to run and market businesses extremely well. However, as we've come to find out, we're not just a business. This is a nation. There are
Right.
peoples, there are lives, there are families. Um, One thing that I can say about like The Rock, look at his team for his production company, look at his team for his energy drink, for his, I mean, he co-owns an entire football league, which, was yet to be seen on whether or not it's going to come back or not.
Right.
But he's created this team of individuals around him, and which is why he has continued success. You would hope that an individual like himself would put a similar type of team around him in office. When I look back to like when Trump was first elected, there was one particular individual that he had brought onto his cabinet, and that was Mad Dog Mattis.
Yes.
And so many people were extremely excited, military members especially. That was probably one of the best chess plays that Trump could have made, was getting Mad Dog involved, because you get that guy involved, then you have the support of the United States military. That's just how that works. That's the level of respect guys like him have. But then you burn that bridge, and then we see what kind of happened with pretty much every single person that Trump had on his original team. Slowly but surely just started to get weaned out, whether it was Bannon. I mean, they just went away. So I don't think people should be able to just come in off the street because they're celebrities and become president of the United States. I unfortunately do believe that is something that we might start to see more and more of, which maybe you have an answer for this. You're a history guy. Aside from like royal families, like that's just a level of celebrity. Has there been a time, or can you think of a time in history where, in any civilization, where there might have been like that figurehead that was like, the president or the king or the queen, that was more of a celebrity figure, and then realistically it was the behind the scenes folks that pretty much ran the show? Is there a time in history that you can think of that it kind of had worked like that, or is that
You've had a
not
number.
really been a thing?
Well, you've had a number of presidents who've had a lot of. They've had a lot of backdoor players. Just to think of, I mean, George Washington, right off the top of my head, George Washington was a rock star. That man was a rock star. He could do no wrong. I mean, they set him on a pedestal, and they want him to run for a third term. And I mean, they paid him an ungodly amount of money for that time. 1789, he was making $25,000 a year, okay, which is relatively more than what they make now. But he had, I mean, you think about it, he had John Adams, he had Thomas Jefferson, he had Alexander Hamilton. All those guys were major players, and they were playing a lot behind the scenes. You know, if you watch Hamilton, there's a lot, a lot of this stuff. I applaud. I haven't watched Hamilton all the way through. Everybody says I need to, but they say that, the stuff that I have seen. I mean, Alexander Hamilton was a big mover and shaker. Another guy that comes to mind is Reagan. We talk about Reagan. Reagan, especially during his second term, during the Iran-Contra scandal, during that whole thing, you found out that there was a lot of people within the State Department, within the Pentagon, who were making a lot of moves behind the scenes that, that's what that whole scandal was about, selling weapons to Iran or selling weapons to Iran or something. No, selling weapons to the Sandinistan rebels in Nicaragua to use that money to help influence Iran to release hostages and stuff like that. I mean, there was millions of dollars that Reagan claimed that he didn't know about. And I think that it depends on who the president is and how, I truly believe that there's a lot going on behind the scenes with Joe that we'll never know about. And I think with Donald Trump, we saw all the back. I think we saw a lot of the stuff that was going on in the background play out because Trump would say, he would pull back the curtain so we could see what was going on behind the scenes. And I think that was a little bit much for people. They couldn't handle that. Well, you listen to our president. He's going to say what's right. And that's not the way Washington works. I mean, we may say that we have one guy at the top, but there are so many players. I mean, look at George W. Bush is another one who just came to mind. When George W. Bush it was Dick Cheney who was running that White House. Dick Cheney was running the White House when George W. Bush was in there. George W. Bush was the figurehead, but Dick Cheney was pulling all the strings in the background.
Yeah, and I think honestly, like one of the biggest backdoor players that we've seen in political history was Monica Lewinsky's backdoor.
I knew that setup was coming. God, I knew that setup was coming.
No. Another one that I always think of too is was it Eleanor Roosevelt that was basically president for the last 4 years of FDR's presidency?
FDR was if you see him towards the end, I mean, right before the last time he met with Stalin and Churchill at Yalta, and that picture of them all sitting out, they're all sitting outside. And I mean, Roosevelt just looked like a corpse just sitting in his wheelchair, Yeah, Eleanor did a lot of his footwork in that last term.
The only other one I could think of was President Taft's crane that lifted him into the bathtub was probably another big help to the political game. Yeah. My God. Do you ever think sometimes, like when we see what kind of happened with Trump, how interesting politics would seem and what real dirty shit would have been uncovered in the past? Like if we would have been in the era of, modern day technology, like if Twitter existed, back when some of these other guys, a big one that I wish we would have really had more technology around that time was JFK. Just based off of what was happening between him and the CIA and the FBI. Could you imagine the leaks? Like if emails would have been leaked during that time, like what we really would have found out. Oh my gosh, that is one of those things that makes you kind of wish it would have happened, 50 years later. So just so you could really, really kind of see what we're seeing today. I mean, it's just incredible.
Well, and you think about that was a complex president there. just the level of stuff that could have been. Yeah, they took care of Kennedy. And you think about everybody says, well, we've had presidents need to be honest, earnest men who are of high moral character and all this stuff. John F. Kennedy, was with Marilyn Monroe. Okay, that was his fling. Roosevelt was a major. Franklin Roosevelt had a lot of women. The press knew whenever he visited Chicago, the press knew not to follow him to a certain hotel, and he had a deal worked out between him and Daley that Daley would get him ladies of the night to come up and in the press. I mean, he had his girlfriends in Chicago.
Really, I did not know that.
Yeah, and when Roosevelt died in it's either Warm Springs or Hot Springs, Georgia, I forgot, but he was down there. That's where he died at, and he was with one of his girlfriends when he died down there. You'll never hear that, but he was with one of his girlfriends down there. Warren Harding. That was shortly after they had that underground tunnel system put underneath the White House. Harding used to sneak his girls in through the tunnel, the back entrance to the White House, and Harding had all kinds of gals in the White House with. And so I mean,
Just think, like they're giving him the rundown of it. Like, all right, sir, this is the most top secret tunnel we've ever built, meant for your safety, for the safety of generations of presidents, for generations from now, to be safe and always have an escape route. How many whores can we fit into this tunnel at any given time?
Keep on, come on.
Yeah,
come on.
that's probably why Nicolas Cage was so interested in it. He's like, the old skank tunnel, huh? Yeah, we could probably steal the Declaration through the old skank tunnel. No, that's man, that's the thing is with politics is they're dirty. I mean, throughout history they've been dirty. You go far back before the time of presidencies, when we talk about monarchs, when we talk about kings, like we've said before, people seem to forget. These were individuals that sometimes would literally just kill people for the sake of killing people because they could with no repercussions. Like, that's who was in charge and made political decisions along the way. And then we evolved. And then we get to the point where we broke free because of no taxation without representation. And then look at like George Washington. Again, remember what the history books taught us. I know it's like one of those things we didn't think about. I never thought twice about it as a kid, but the amount of times that like people say, oh yeah, George Washington had, wooden teeth or hippopotamus teeth. They're like, no. He had dentures made from his slaves' teeth. And we just learn more about history. Like the good and the ugly of all these politicians is there's so much more. Like I always find it funny when I think back of like the old West, when we think about that, is like, if you didn't like someone or if someone did you dirt, you could be like, I'm going to challenge you to a duel. And we're literally going to walk, turn, and shoot at each other. And if you die, you die. And if you don't die, well, we can do it again a week later after we're both healed. I mean, that kind of stuff is wild, but that's kind of what has led to shape the United States as we know it now. I mean, and that's, we take a lot for granted of what we have now.
But I think it's wrong though. And we saw this with Trump. To put a man up on a pedestal is wrong. As the chief, I mean, he is the chief of state. He's not, when you refer to the Queen of England, she is the head of state, but she doesn't have any actual power. Okay. When you talk about the president being the chief of state, he is the symbol of American. He is the symbol of America, but he also has the power to boot. Okay, so do we elevate this guy? I mean, what happened and it happened with Obama and it happened with Trump. Both sides elevated their guy to a savior-like status.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that shouldn't be. I look at George W. He was. I mean, people recognized him for what he was. But the thing with W was, he was on. I mean, he was a goof, but he was honest about being a goof. You know, he made mistakes, and people for. I mean, to me, and I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but to me, one of the most how he saved face in this event. He had the Japanese prime minister came to the White House for a dinner, and Bush literally threw up like right next to him. He got sick during this, and I mean those were early meme days, but just seeing all these pictures of Bush just tossing his cookies, right beside and then but Bush could go and he made fun of himself at in front of the press, and he laughed at himself, but now you've got these guys who are, this is what are we now? How far are we removed from the election? We are
God, almost
We're like
over half a year.
yeah, okay,
10 months.
yeah. So
No, not quite.
why are we still seeing Trump Pence signs in people's yards?
Well, there's some people that literally thought that there was propaganda out there that was like Trump was chosen by God. Like there was actual propaganda out there for like these like Christian, like you were talking about, like the Christian people, like Trump's for the Christians. Trump's the Christian man, and it's like really, like Trump is for the Christian people.
Well, I literally see signs now that say literally like we know you. It was rigged, Trump 2024. Like I'm already seeing those.
Well, he's starting rallies. He's going to start doing his
signs.
Save America rallies or whatever.
I can tell you this. It has been very interesting, and I don't know whether or not I don't necessarily agree with it one way or the other, but not seeing, like, due to the fact that Trump literally can't tweet, he literally can't get on Facebook, he can't get on YouTube, to like the lack of Trump in my Twitter feed, Facebook feed, stuff like that is interesting. However, it just goes to show that there is staying power in certain things, because literally seeing him have rallies and see the side still now is insane.
Well,
there's still news networks that promote it.
And you said something a while ago, Travis, and about how Christians were like, "Oh, this guy was a point." And I've said this before, and I'm never one to quote scripture too much on our podcast, but this is for our religious right friends who listen. Okay, I'm just going to read this. This is from the this was Paul's letter to the church at Rome. Now, at the time when Paul wrote this letter, okay, Nero was the Caesar. Nero, the guy who dipped Christians in wax and used them as human torches in his garden, the guy who put Christians in the Colosseum, he's writing this to the church at Rome. And this is what Paul says. He says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God." Okay? Now, so for our Christian friends on the right, you take that scripture for what it says. Every authority has been appointed by God. Republicans, Democrats, independents, those people have been put in place by God. So in that sense, and that's why, and this was something else I was going to bring up, that we got just a little bit of time left here. So the largest denomination in the United States right now is the Southern Baptist Convention, which that's oxymoron in and of itself, the Southern Baptist. But the Southern Baptist Convention, they met 2 weeks ago, and I was talking to my cousin. Her husband is a associate pastor of a church in Louisville, and they went to the convention because it was in Louisville. And the Southern Baptist Convention almost had a split at their last meeting, because there were people there who said, there was this group who brought an amendment before the floor of the convention and said, we as a denomination need to consider pulling out of the political ring. Religion, I mean, they in essence said religion does not belong in politics. And they said there was a bunch of people who just got up and left because the debate went on for hours, you know, and that to me is just, you know, with everybody on the religious right who I've always said, and I will continue to say, sold their soul to the devil for Trump, because that's God's man. Again, putting somebody on a pedestal because they represent what you think is right, and that's God's man. No, there is no such thing as God's man. God has in there whoever He wants to have in there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a dangerous ideology.
Well, and even looking at like
You know, to put somebody
during the
on a
Trump
pedestal so high like that.
during Trumpian politics, like look at some of the churches even in the area that we were from that split up. I mean, and it wasn't necessarily just because of Trumpian politics,
A lot
but
of it was.
I mean, you can think like how much of that definitely played a factor. There is one quick question I want to ask you guys before we roll, and it doesn't have to be in depth, but I would just like to see get your guys' genuine reaction and kind of thoughts real quick. The first question: do you think? Well, I guess there's three. The first question is: do you think that we will ever have a presidential candidate in the next 100 years that isn't Democrat or Republican? Two, do you think that we will have a president nominee in the next 100 years? Or do you think it goes to more like a council or different kind of elective system in the next 100 years? And three, do you think the United States as a whole remains as a whole in the next 100 years? Or do you see any kind of successful secession in the next 100 years?
Travis, you want to go first?
Yeah, to answer question number one, I hope that people can see the problems with this far left, far right, two-party divide that we have right now, and would consider other options. I would really hope that people because some people don't know that there's more than two parties, which blows my mind. So I would like to see a new president someday. I think that would benefit us a lot. Number two, as far as the change in voting, you're talking about like a council elects the president, or the people still elect?
Like the people don't elect a president, the people vote for, let's say, like a council of individuals. Like there's no longer just a president. There's different people that they elect for, like, so instead of voting for president, you vote for like Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of State, that kind of power.
I think there will always be a president. I think people want to be led, whether they want to admit it or not. People want somebody to lead, and I think a president, as long as the United States is still the United States, there will be a president. And then your third question, if we continue this direction that we're going, and it seems like it's going at a more rapid pace every day, if we abandon all logic and reason for this non-compromising arguments that we're constantly having, and there's just more divide and more divide, eventually these bickerings, these arguments, these protests, eventually it's going to get violent, and way more than what we saw last year. I mean, I don't know. If just to answer it quickly, if we keep going in the direction that we're going, yes, undoubtedly, I do see a split. How significant it is, I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to think that we would have, in the next 30 years, I think it is possible that we could see a third party candidate. Like you said, Travis, there is, I want to say, at least seven, six, maybe seven parties that I know of that are out there. Libertarian being the biggest one of the bunch. As people get more tired, I do and I don't see us going to a third party, but you need to really have a very popular, very well-known candidate. I mean, the last time that a third party candidate even had a chance of winning was Teddy Roosevelt back in the election of 1908.
Yep.
That was the last time when he ran the Bull Moose Party. That was the last time that you saw a guy who was even close to winning. So to answer question number one, I do and I don't. I would like to see it. I would love to see it. I have voted now Libertarian in the last two elections, and I am proud of what I did. I voted with my convictions. Question number two. I think question number two will lead into question number three. If we see a change in the way we elect our president or how our leaders are chosen, we're going to see the decimation of this country as it exists. We are pushing for so much. I think you mentioned this last week, Sean. So much radical change has occurred within the last 8 years that we've seen. So much stuff has went on. Now we're pushing for the end of the filibuster, and it seems like it's one thing after another. If anything, I mean, maybe we go to a parliamentary system where we vote for the party that's going to be in the majority, and then they get to choose who their leader is. That's how the British do it. That's how the Canadians do it. That's how a lot of countries do it. There are actually more countries that use the parliamentarian style of government than the federal form of government like we use. And so, that's a possibility. And then the last question, honestly, and I'm with Travis on this, I think, of course, one of these days I would love to do an apocalypse show, an end time show.
Love it.
I think we could have a lot of fun with that, and I've done, and I'm not saying this to be braggadocious, I've done a substantial amount of research on end time stuff according to the book of Revelation. When you look at Revelations, and I'll just give you this, in the end times, the book of Revelations in a roundabout way mentions the Middle East. It mentions Israel. It mentions a country called Gog, G-O-G, which is basically where Russia is located at now. And it mentions the Assyrians, which is Syria, Iraq area. Okay? Iraq, Iran. And we're not in the picture anywhere. There's no, I think that this what we're going through right now, my personal view, and this may freak people out or whatever, but my personal view is right now where we're at right now is playing us into that direction, because everybody wants a divided America, because we either, to quote Ben Franklin, we either hang together or we shall all hang separately, assuredly. So
I have one question I'd like to ask you, V, before we end this tonight.
Mm-hmm.
This is going back to like we were talking about potential presidents. This is you're old enough that you probably remember this. You can give a good answer for it. I watched this documentary about 2 years ago. NBC did on JFK Jr. I was really fascinated by it, and they kind of tell his story and everything. And they claim that he was in line to undoubtedly be a president. Do you think he would have been president, and you think he would have been a good president?
Yes, he was. I mean, the way the Kennedy family works, and that you want to talk about a good study is the Kennedy family itself. Joseph Kennedy, who was John F. Kennedy's and Teddy Kennedy's and Edward Kennedy's dad. they actually had, and I forgot what the name of this guy was. The oldest brother died in the Navy during World War II, and he was the one that Joseph was modeling to be next president, not John. Okay, and John F. Kennedy Jr. though that guy was, I think, from what I remember, they were modeling him, they were shaping him. He was a handsome guy, he was a smart guy, he was a Harvard educated guy. He knew politics. He kind of flirted around with running, kind of like what his dad did. They were positioning him to get ready to run for the Massachusetts House of Representatives, just the same career path that his dad took, and they were going to frame him. Would he have been a good president? I don't know. He was a smart guy, a handsome guy. I'm sure he probably had a skeleton in his closet just like Dad did. Who knows? But John F. Kennedy Jr. was definitely. He was definitely being what's the word that they say, that he was being formed for that job. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious, and you were around to remember it. So.
Yep.
Well,
that's all I got.
Yeah, I actually had a lot of fun with this episode. We kind of did this one off the cusp, but I think we had a really good talk, which was great.
I am going
gentlemen, before go ahead.
I do want to say this next week, and I haven't confirmed again with our guest next week. This is going to be, and we'll talk with the fellows about this, but this is one that we're all going to have to do our homework on. This is going to be a very interesting talk next week. I have a feeling that the guest this guest is going to be someone who is very outspoken. She's very well educated person in her beliefs and everything, and so I really tune in next week. I hope that you guys join us next week for our podcast next week, because I think it's going to be really good next week.
No, I agree. Yeah. Travis, do you have anything to add before we sign out?
I got nothing, man. Good episode tonight, guys. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, and literally with that said, everyone, thank you all again so much. It means a lot to us that you guys continue to listen as we continue to grow and perfect things and get things better. Again, make sure you guys check us out on YouTube, right here on Facebook, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. There's all kinds of different ways to give us a listen. If there's anything that you guys would like us to add to the conversation throughout the week, please don't hesitate. Message us on Facebook, Voice of Reason Podcast 2021. Shoot me a text, shoot Travis a text, shoot Andy a text if you know us personally. Send us, any kind of contact you want, just so we can answer your guys' questions or talk about any topics that you guys might like us to talk about. We'd be more than happy to. That's the whole point of this show. Mm-hmm. But with that said, this was a great conversation, as it is getting late here. We will sign off. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for listening to us right here at the Voice of Reason podcast. And we cannot wait to talk to you guys next week. We'll see you then.